I found out my wife was cheating with multiple men. She said if I told anyone, she'd end my reputation. I found out my wife was cheating with multiple men. She said if I told anyone, she'd end my reputation. They say hindsight is 20/20. But I look back now and think, no, I didn't miss the signs. I ignored them. Because when you're in love with someone's potential, you'll excuse their patterns, their absences, their inconsistencies. You'll rewrite the story in your head 1,000 times before you accept the truth. My wife, her name's Alyssa, was beautiful in a way that turned heads in every room. Smart, charismatic, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to make people trust her. And I did, for years. We met at a networking event when I was just starting to scale my company. She was managing a client campaign for a marketing firm. Sharp, confident, a little bit intimidating, and I loved that about her. We got married 2 years after we met. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Power couple vibes, travel photos, the fun marriage people envied on Instagram. We didn't have kids, not because we didn't want them, but because Alyssa always said, let's enjoy each other first. It sounded sweet at the time. Now it feels like another thing she used to delay the inevitable. Our home was a sleek 2-story with white walls and glass decor. It looked clean, curated, like a magazine spread, but it was cold, sterile, like we were both guests in a life we only pretended to live. Still, I didn't question it. I was working 60-hour weeks, pushing for a big contract. I'd come home late. She'd be out with the girls or networking. She always had an answer, always had a smile, but the longer we were married, the less I felt like I actually knew her. There were no shared routines, no rituals, just passing hugs, surface-level chats. And then there were the nights she wouldn't come home until 2 a.m., always with a reason, always with that look that dared me to question her. I didn't, because deep down I didn't want the truth. Until the day it punched me in the face, not with suspicion, but with proof. And that day, that's when everything I thought I knew about my wife and my life unraveled. There's this thing your gut does, a quiet, creeping unease that builds under your skin like static. You can't point to it, you can't prove it, but you feel it. With Alyssa, it started small, little shifts. The way she kept her phone face down, always. The way she'd leave the room to take client calls, even during dinner. The way she flinched when I asked simple things like, when are you back tonight? And I noticed. But I lied to myself, said she was stressed, tired, overworked. I told myself it was normal for things to plateau after a few years of marriage. That distance didn't mean deception. But deception always looks like distance, until it doesn't. I remember one night in particular. She came home after 1 a.m., heels in her hand, mascara smudged slightly like she'd cried or laughed too hard. She moved past me with a kiss on the cheek and the scent of someone else's cologne clinging faintly to her jacket. Not mine. I froze, not visibly, not enough for her to see. But something inside me clicked. A switch I hadn't realized was still working. I went upstairs and stood in our bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror, asking a question I already knew the answer to. Would she ever admit it if I asked? The next morning, she was making eggs, like nothing happened. Bright, chatty, like someone playing a role she'd already memorized. So I decided to test the silence. I left her alone with her phone on the kitchen island while she stepped out to grab something from the car. It buzzed. Once, then again. I didn't touch it. I just leaned slightly, enough to see the name on the screen. Daniel. Dinner was amazing. I remember the way the blood left my face, like my body knew what my brain refused to accept. Daniel. Not a colleague, not a client, someone I'd never heard her mention. When she walked back in, I was still standing there. She looked at me and something flickered in her expression. Not panic, but calculation. Like she was scanning me for reaction. I said nothing. She said nothing. And in that silence, I realized she wasn't scared I'd find out. She didn't think I ever would. Because I was the good husband, the provider, the calm one, the man too busy to notice the truth unraveling behind his back. But I wasn't blind anymore. I just didn't know how deep the lie went. Not yet. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because the moment you accuse someone like Alyssa, you lose access to the truth. She was too smooth, too quick with her tongue. If I gave her a chance to spin a story, she'd do it so well I might believe it. So I did what I had never done in 14 years of marriage. I started lying too. Subtle, quiet lies. I pretended I had late meetings that didn't exist. I forgot to mention when I came home early. I left the house, then parked a block away and walked back, just to see what she did when she thought I was gone. And what I saw? It wasn't rage-inducing. It wasn't shocking. It was surgical. She had a system, different names, different routines. One night it was Jen's birthday. The next it was a client dinner that magically didn't leave a trace on her company card. I checked. Of course I checked. I started digging, and I dug deeper than I thought I could. Her laptop. She never used it much anymore, said she preferred her phone, but it was still synced to our shared cloud. Old messages, deleted photos, location data. There were patterns I hadn't noticed before. Repeated Uber pickups from the same luxury condo downtown, Venmo payments labeled "Just Us," calendar events that had been deleted but still lived in the cloud's backup history. I backed everything up. Screenshots, PDFs, photos. Created a hidden folder on a drive she couldn't reach. I didn't know what I was going to do with it. Not yet. But if she was going to set the rules by lying, I'd play by them too. Better, quieter, smarter. And I kept playing the role. The doting husband. Bringing home dinner. Asking how her day went. Pretending to care about the details of a life I no longer recognized. Every time she laughed at a message that wasn't mine, I smiled back. Every time she kissed me goodnight and rolled away 2 seconds later, I whispered, "Love you," just like always. I was studying her, watching her, the same way you watch a fire to make sure it doesn't burn the house down before you've grabbed what you need. The hardest part? It wasn't seeing the betrayal, it was seeing how easy it came to her. Like this wasn't a mistake, like it was routine, habit, lifestyle. And one night, when she said she was going to a networking event, dressed like she was headed to a rooftop bar, I followed her, from a distance, no confrontation. Just watched from across the street as she laughed, leaned into some guy's chest like he was hers. He held her waist like he'd done it 100 times. And she didn't flinch, not once. In that moment, I realized something that hurt worse than the cheating itself. She wasn't afraid of losing me. She never thought I'd leave. Because people like Alyssa, they don't cheat because they're unfulfilled. They cheat because they think they're untouchable, and I was about to show her she wasn't. When I got home that night, I didn't cry. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't break anything. I sat on the edge of our bed, still dressed, and stared at nothing for what felt like hours. The image of her, smiling, her arms draped around another man, her head tilted like she belonged there, it looped in my mind on repeat. But it wasn't jealousy that burned. It was clarity, cold, surgical. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't, I got drunk and made a bad choice. This was a life she built in parallel to mine, a double existence. And I'd been funding it, enabling it, smiling through it. 12 years of marriage, and I didn't recognize the woman I came home to. Her habits, her eyes, the way she touched me like she was checking a box. Everything now felt scripted, artificial. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay next to her, awake, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, steady, peaceful, unbothered. She had no idea I'd followed her, no idea I'd watched her be someone else, and I kept my silence. Not because I was afraid, but because I was waiting for the moment she'd realize I wasn't playing along anymore. And it came sooner than I expected. The next few days, she was different, softer, just more careful. She'd ask where I was going, what time I'd be home. She'd reach for my hand on the couch like she used to, only now it felt rehearsed, a test. When I didn't flinch, she leaned in closer, like she could smell suspicion on me. But I gave her nothing. Because when you're dealing with someone who manipulates truth for sport, silence becomes your sharpest weapon. And mine was sharpened to the bone. I studied her the way you study a ticking clock. Each word, each glance, each breath. I stored them. She was trying to read me, but I'd already stopped speaking her language. Instead, I read the signs she didn't think I'd notice. She started locking her phone, something she'd never done before. She cleared her browser history daily. Her gym bag stayed in the car, even though I knew she hadn't been to the gym in weeks. There were gaps she could no longer fill, and the more she tried to patch them, the more obvious the holes became. I wasn't angry, I was detached. Because anger would have made this emotional. Detachment made it strategic, and that's what I needed to be. Strategic. I started laying the groundwork, opened a new bank account, consulted a lawyer, made a copy of every document tied to our finances, transferred assets she didn't even know I had into a trust under my name alone. She was busy hiding lovers. I was hiding freedom. And yet, she still looked at me with that confident little smile, like she still believed she was ahead, that she could keep lying and I'd keep pretending. But I'd stopped pretending the night I followed her. And the man she thought would never leave? He was already halfway out the door. For a while, I thought I knew what I was dealing with. A one-time thing, maybe a fling, maybe someone she met at work, something I could name, categorize, move past. But I was wrong, because it wasn't one man, it wasn't one name, it was several. She kept them organized, like a schedule, a rotation. I found out by accident. I was going through our shared iCloud account, digging deeper into old backups I hadn't looked at before. There were messages that hadn't synced to her current phone, but they were still there, hiding in corners she didn't think I'd check. And each thread told its own story. There was Tyler, who called her my dirty little secret. They had hotel receipts, photo attachments I couldn't bear to open. Then there was Mark, a gym trainer who sent her workout videos that always ended with "miss your body next to mine." Ethan, a colleague, had emails, company email threads turned private chats, turned late-night sexting. And Ben, the one who sent her a playlist titled Our Nights, full of love songs she used to claim reminded her of us. 4 names. That I know of, each one had their own tone, their own nickname. She mirrored them, became whoever they wanted her to be. Funny with one, demure with another, aggressively flirtatious with the third. And I was the default setting, the husband, the anchor she used to keep her world stable while she played in chaos. The worst part? Some of those messages went back years. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't boredom. This was lifestyle. A double life so carefully curated, so delicately balanced, I almost had to respect the sheer effort it took to keep it hidden. Almost. Instead, I felt hollow. You don't feel rage when you read the way your wife flirts with strangers in the same breath she texts you, "Love you, babe," picking up dinner. You feel something deeper, darker. You feel erased. Everything I'd built, the house, the trust, the long nights spent working so she didn't have to, suddenly felt like a joke I didn't get. And that's when I stopped waiting, stopped observing, stopped hoping for clarity. Because clarity had arrived, and when it screamed louder than any confrontation ever could. She came home that night talking about a team retreat she needed to plan. I nodded. She smiled. She kissed my cheek. And I knew the woman I'd once married didn't exist anymore, or maybe she never had. I didn't tell her anything that week, not a word, not a raised voice, not a single shift in tone. I was done bleeding out emotions for someone who treated loyalty like a costume, something to put on when convenient, then discard the moment it didn't fit the scene. She still played the wife, still brought home flowers from the market, still posted filtered photos of us with captions like, "Grateful for this life." And I let her, because when someone crafts an illusion, the cruelest thing you can do is let them live in it, just long enough for the floor to drop out from under them. It took 2 more days to gather everything. Not just the texts, not just the names, but the receipts, the timelines, the overlaps. I printed screenshots, emails, transaction logs, sorted and stapled, labeled with color-coded tabs like case files. I wasn't planning a confrontation. I was planning an exit. Because once you've seen a person for who they really are, you don't argue with them anymore. You extract yourself. I moved some final funds, closed the joint credit line, deactivated the second card she used for personal expenses. The house was in my name, the business too. Her name was on the lease to a car I paid off years ago. I'd let her keep it. She didn't deserve more. Friday night, I came home early. She was in the kitchen, wine glass in hand, music playing. A scene she'd created too many times before. Aesthetic, cozy, pretend. I placed the folder on the counter, didn't speak. She looked up, puzzled, then reached for it, flipping it open. First page, her messages to Tyler. Second, photos from a hotel lobby cam, time-stamped. She flipped again. Mark, then Ethan, then Ben. Her hand trembled. She didn't cry, didn't scream. She laughed. A cold, brittle thing that cracked in the middle. Then, the words I should have seen coming. "If you show this to anyone, I swear I will destroy your reputation." There it was, the threat. The mask fully off. No more sweet wife. No more excuses. Just a cornered manipulator trying to find a weapon that still worked. I didn't flinch. I told her the truth. That I wasn't here to fight. That I wasn't here to listen. That I wasn't afraid of her. Not anymore. She tried to argue. Said I was being dramatic. That it wasn't what it looked like. That things got out of hand. I stayed silent. Because people like her thrive on reaction, on drama, on pulling you into their chaos just to say, "See, you're no better." But I wasn't playing that game anymore. I told her she had 48 hours to gather her things. She could take whatever she wanted. Furniture, clothes, keepsakes. The only thing she couldn't take was my peace. I told her the bank cards were canceled and the utilities would be cut off on Monday. And then I walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door. Behind me, I heard her call my name, not in anger, in confusion. Like she finally realized I meant it, that I wasn't bluffing, that the man she thought would stay through anything was already gone. She didn't pack up and leave quietly. Of course not. Alyssa was the kind of person who couldn't handle losing without making sure someone else bled on the way down. The first 24 hours after I gave her the deadline, she did nothing. No boxes, no bags, just pacing, watching me, like she expected me to crack, like this was still a game she could win. But I gave her nothing. I worked from home in silence, took calls, typed emails, ate in the same room without ever acknowledging her presence. That, I think, hurt her more than yelling ever could have. The second day, she exploded. Not physically. Alyssa was too calculated for that. She started making calls. Loud ones. In the living room, on speaker where I could hear. She called her sister, crying about how I'd lost it. How I'd become emotionally abusive. How I was paranoid and controlling and cutting her off from everything. Then she called her boss. Claimed she needed time off because I'd blindsided her with separation and that she feared I might retaliate. And just like that, the image of me began shifting in the eyes of people who didn't know the truth. A few hours later, my phone buzzed with a message from a mutual friend. "Hey, is everything okay? Alyssa said you guys are separating. She's really shaken up." I didn't respond, not out of fear, out of restraint. Because the worst thing you can do to someone who's trying to twist the narrative is refuse to play along. But inside, I felt the burn. Not from the betrayal, I'd already buried that, but from the insult. 12 years of marriage, and this is who she decided to become when the truth threatened her comfort. The next morning, she tried a new angle. She left a note on the kitchen table. It read like a confession. A soft, apologetic letter about mistakes made, pain caused, and how she wasn't herself lately. She asked if we could talk, said maybe therapy would help, said we shouldn't throw away a decade over things that weren't serious. That line nearly made me laugh. Weren't serious? 4 men, 2 hotel receipts, dozens of messages describing nights I didn't know happened. In the same timeline we were supposed to be together. If that wasn't serious, I don't want to know what her idea of real betrayal looked like. That day, I changed the locks, not out of spite, for my safety. She hadn't packed anything, hadn't moved an inch toward leaving, and I knew enough by now to expect escalation. That night, I stayed at a friend's house, let the security cameras run, didn't warn her, didn't say where I went. The next morning, there were 27 missed calls, 9 voicemails, 4 texts that ranged from begging to furious. The final one said, "You're going to regret this. I know people. And I know what you're hiding too." That was her last card. A bluff. A weak one. Because, unlike her, I had nothing to hide. After her final message, the veiled threat, the desperation disguised as control, I knew what had to be done. I took the next day off work. No more waiting, no more silence, just action. I moved through the house like a ghost, boxing up her presence one room at a time. The closet, half hers. The bathroom drawers, hair products, perfumes, expensive skincare kits. The bookshelf, novels she never finished, decorations she picked out because they looked good in photos. I packed everything. Her life, curated, performative, hollow, sealed in brown boxes and taped shut like a closing statement. I didn't break anything. I didn't smell her shirts or reread her notes. I didn't give myself that pain. I simply moved. When I finished, I arranged a courier. I labeled the boxes and left them by the door. Then I sent her a single message. "Your things are packed. A courier will deliver them. Do not return." That was it. I deleted the thread. An hour later, a knock. The courier arrived. And just like that, the physical part of her, her scent, her clothes, her claims on my space, disappeared with the sound of cardboard sliding into a van. I stood in the empty hallway. And that's when it hit me. Not a surge, not an explosion, but a slow rising flood. I sank onto the floor, against the wall, knees pulled in, and cried. For the first time since it all began, I let it come. The pain I'd buried while I played the calm husband, the grief I masked while collecting screenshots, the rage I swallowed as she smiled through betrayal. It came back all at once. Tears that didn't ask permission, shaking hands, silent sobs that turned into gasps when I realized how long I'd been holding my breath, living in a house where I couldn't speak the truth. I don't know how long I stayed like that. But when I finally stood, I wasn't lighter. Not yet. But I was real. And that was something I hadn't felt in a long time. In the days that followed, I rebuilt quietly. I rekeyed the locks, had the bedroom repainted, donated the last of our together things, started making my own meals again, simple ones. Eggs, toast, black coffee, no performances, no smiling through resentment, just honest, boring, beautiful life. I heard from others that Alyssa had taken a break from work, that she was not doing well, that one of the men, Ben, ghosted her, and another posted something online about being manipulated by a married woman. She tried reaching out again, one email. We both made mistakes, but I still miss you. I didn't reply, because the version of me she's writing to, the man she thought would bend, doesn't live here anymore. She didn't just lose me, she lost access. And now when I sit alone in a house that finally feels like mine, I don't smile out of revenge. I smile because the silence is real, Because I don't need to doubt every glance, decode every laugh, or pretend not to notice when someone flinches at love. I'm not healed yet, but I'm honest and I'm free. And if she ever reads this, let me say one last thing. You didn't just cheat on your husband. You gambled everything against the one person who would have protected you forever. And now you're just a folder in a drawer I'll never open again.